morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of our SIMM webinar series. And thank you again for taking the time out to come and spend an hour with us. Today's topic is very interesting, and in the new world of technology metals, it's always good to expose ourselves to new ideas. We have Paul here this morning, who is a mining engineer, and he used to be the project director for LAC Lithium, a junior mining company in Argentina. The company was taken private in 2019, and he now works as an independent consultant. So we have a very interesting industry perspective. Paul, you're welcome to load your presentation so long, and we are looking forward to hearing your perspective on the overview of the lithium industry in the world. As usual, attendees are welcome to post questions on the Q&A, and I'll monitor both the Q&A and chat, and we can have some questions at the end of the presentation and have maybe a lively discussion if there's any questions. Thank you very much, Paul, for your time, and please go ahead with your presentation as soon as you're ready.
Good morning, everyone, in this official last day of lockdown. A quick disclaimer, as Isabel said, I'm a mining engineer. Unfortunately, a discussion of lithium involves a lot of discussion of processing and chemistry, which is not my strong point. I'll try to do it justice, but I just thought I'd put that out there. An overview of what we're going to be talking about today. Quick introduction into lithium, what it's used for, and then current production, which is from two sources. We'll discuss brine sources and hard rock sources, and then look at the current producers. And then we look at the future, and we can't discuss lithium without discussing electric vehicles, and then where future production might come from. Lithium is the third element on the periodic table. It is the lightest metal, and it is the lightest solid element. It's also the lightest alkali metal. You see here's a picture of lithium metal. It's stored in oil because the moment it's exposed to air, it reacts with the oxygen and disappears. Therefore, it does not occur in its native form. But due to that nature, lithium has many applications that we see down here in the graph. Currently, about 40% is used in batteries, and that's mostly batteries in your laptops and your smartphones, power tools, those sort of things. It's used in glass and ceramics industry. That's to harden glass, to harden ceramics, to make them fireproof. So that would be things like the iPhone screens, things like that. It's used as a lubricant in the drilling industry. And if you ever touch lithium concentrated brine, you feel it's very, very fluid. It feels like you're touching oil. So you can understand why it's a good lubricant. The medical use is also very interesting. Lithium is given to patients with bipolar disorder. What type of lithium products do we produce and sell? The most common product is lithium carbonate. It's a white powder. It's stable to transport. And we differentiate two types. We have battery grade, which is 4 nines purity. So very difficult to produce. And then we have technical grade, which is used in industrial applications. When you talk about lithium production globally, we talk about lithium carbonate equivalent. So everything is converted back to lithium carbonate. So often people will say they intend to produce LCE, which just stands for lithium carbonate equivalent. So some people say we're going to produce 10,000 tons of LCE. But what they actually mean is they're producing either lithium carbonate or other products converted to lithium carbonate. It's also used, we get into the electric vehicles later, but it's used in high cobalt, NMC batteries, and other battery types such as LFP. LFP is, for instance, what Tesla uses. And the conversion ratio, and we're going to have quite a few conversion ratios today because lithium is quoted in different units and chemistry, but 1 unit of lithium is 5.3 units of lithium carbonate. pictures, that's the white powder, lithium carbonate. We were always joking that in South America, we produce a white powder that sells for about $10,000 a ton. Now that could be two types of white powder, but we produce the legal one. And it's sold in 100-kilogram bags, like here. These would be from an operation in Argentina. The other product that's important is lithium hydroxide. It's less stable. It decays during transport, but it's getting increasing use in lower cobalt NMC batteries. So that is often regarded as more of a lithium product of the future. It converts that 1 lithium to 6 lithium hydroxides. And there are many, many other products, which I call niche. I'm not going to discuss them in a lot of detail, but it's lithium sulfate, lithium chloride, lithium phosphate. Those are all converted back to lithium LCE units. And they're often produced from either of these two products. Getting into the lithium production from brines, the brine deposits are sedimentary deposits. They form from volcanic rocks that get eroded and washed into a valley where there's no outflow, and then evaporation concentrates the lithium. There are really two types of evaporation pans, or salars, as they're called in Argentina. We have the immature salars, which are white salt pans. There's a picture here of Salinas Grandes in Argentina. And then we have another type of salar, which is called immature salar. The only difference, there's the same sort of geology underneath, but on top this has these brown salt crystals growing on the top. And the most famous one there would be the Salar Atacama. A little bit more on that later. Most of the brines are produced in what is known as the lithium triangle in South America, which is it's on borders 3 countries. It's Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina that have these salt pans, and the most famous one is the Salar Atacama in Chile. They make up about, they make up about 50% of the production of lithium, but about 2/3 of global inventory. They're known as salars. We have some other salars globally. There are a few small ones in Nevada in the USA, and then in China, in the Changsha province, there are a few which are mostly used to produce potassium, but also are used for lithium as a byproduct. And the grades in salars are reported either as part per million lithium or milligrams a liter. Now, you'd think that's the same, but it's not due to various molar ratios. 1,000 milligrams a liter or 1 gram a liter is about 1,200 parts per million. So there's a conversion there, and be careful when you look at grades that you use the right number and compare apples with apples. How does the production from brines work? We start by pumping or trenching the brine from the salar. So here's an example of a trench in Salinas Grandes in Argentina. So essentially you just dig a hole into the salt, and the brine is everywhere. It's in this porous salt and it just flows in there. So you can put a pump in there and pump, and it'll just recharge from the salar around it. So that's the production of basically a salty brine. That comes out at about 500 to 600 milligrams a liter of lithium, and we put it into evaporation ponds. It stays there for about 18 to 24 months and basically the sun concentrates it. So you evaporate the water, the salts start dropping out at the bottom, and you get a lot of salt tailings, halite, and also potassium chloride as a byproduct. And some operations, actually, that's the main product, and the lithium is the byproduct. Often we have to add chemicals, mostly lime, calcium carbonate, and some other niche ones, but it depends on the chemistry of the brine. The next step, then, we produce a concentrate, which is about 50 times richer in lithium than this brine. So after 24 months, we have this concentrated lithium brine, and that gets put into a lithium plant. Now, this lithium plant can either be located next to your evaporation ponds, as is shown in this picture here, and this is the Orecobra operation in Argentina, where the plant is right next to the ponds. But it could also be hundreds of kilometers away because the masses aren't big. You can truck this to a plant which is next to an industrial factory or wherever. The problem then is that we produce depleted brine as a waste product, which often needs to get returned back to the evaporation ponds. So you'd have to truck that back. You could also throw it away or evaporate it, but often this contains quite a lot of lithium. So we then produce our lithium carbonate from this lithium plant, and the recoveries across the system are low, 50 to 60%, and that's the industry sort of goal. That's the high end of recoveries. We lose a lot of lithium here in the tailings dropping out. We lose lithium here. We lose lithium here. What are the mass flows involved? Let's say we want to produce 20,000 tons per annum of lithium carbonate, which is a good size operation. We would then need around 9 million cubic meters per year of brine. 9 billion liters of brine need to be pumped into these evaporation ponds, and we're talking about 800 hectares of evaporation ponds that would be needed in this size operation. We would produce 3 million tons a year of waste salts, which would need to require storage and management. The actual concentrated brine, as I said, is quite a low volume. We reduce volume by about a factor of 100 between here and here. So that's why we can truck this. Yeah. So the question that everybody asks is, why can't we substitute the evaporation ponds? We don't want to wait 24 months to produce our lithium, and 800 hectares is a huge area. And there are many, many technologies on the table at the moment. We're looking at nanofiltration membranes. This would be things like desalination plants, ion exchange, solvent extraction, electrochemistry. All of these are currently being trialed, and many companies are selling them as viable solutions. And they have a lot of advantages. They reduce the footprint of the operation. We don't need 800 hectares. We don't need 24-month lockup. We do get better recoveries. And we don't need to add lime and some of the other chemicals in the operation. But at the moment, these are just a trial stage. They are really unproven at scale. The energy requirements for any of these solutions are significant. At the size operation that I demonstrated earlier, 20,000 tons a year, we're looking at between 50 and 100 megawatts of energy to do this. When we use the solar evaporation ponds, we get that energy for free because the sun is doing the work for us. We also then need to take that entire 9 million cubic meters a year of brine and put it back into the solar, which it impacts on the groundwater systems in the area, and it's often not environmentally acceptable. So this is a huge hurdle that also still needs to be proven at scale. A case study for a typical brine operation is the Salar de Atacama. It's about 2,000 meters above sea levels. All these salars are between 2,000 and 4,000 meters above sea levels, just due to the nature of how they form in the Andes Mountains. They're often in very, very dry areas, which is why the evaporation is so good. These are some pictures. Now, the Salar de Atacama was initially developed by SQM. It's in Chile. It was started as a potassium operation. There are some stockpiles of potassium chloride, that's the fertilizer, and they are producing about 2 million tons a year of potassium chloride at this operation, which is about 5% of the global market. The lithium was initially an afterthought, but now they're converting to lithium as their primary product. The grades are phenomenal. They're looking at about 2,000, that's a typo, 2,000 milligrams a liter of lithium, about 4 times higher than most other salars in the world. It's the world's driest desert, which really helps with the evaporation ponds. The current production is about 70,000 tons a year of lithium carbonate equivalent, because they're producing both carbonate and hydroxide, also some chloride. Not all of it from SQM. Albemarle is also operating in that area. But here, as I said earlier, sometimes the lithium plant is actually located away from the salar. This is the case here. It's located about 100 away at the sea at an area called La Negra, which is where they produce the final lithium carbonate. Here's an overview of some of the biggest salars in the world and the grades. So this again just points out how good Atacama is. I've circled the lithium grades here. Atacama is around 2,500 milligrams a liter. Compared to, say, Hombre Muerto, which means dead man. Don't know why, but that's the name of the place. That's in Argentina, and that's the current operation operated by Livent, and they're at around 700 milligrams a liter. And another operating salar is Olaroz Cauchari, which is Orocobre, also around 700 milligrams a liter. So Atacama is unique. The only one that comes close is Maricunga, also in Chile, that's currently not operational. Moving on to hard rock sources, which is the other source of lithium. This might be more understandable to us normal miners. It's a typical hard rock pegmatite where we find these lithiums, and we find them in a mineral called spodumene. There's a picture of spodumene. It's a lithium alumina silicate. And spodumene in its pure form is about 3.7% lithium, which is 20% lithium carbonate, but we don't find spodumene in a pure form. It's often, or not an ore body. It's often associated with other minerals. It's associated with cassiterite and tantalite, so those are often mined as byproducts. Very conventional drill and blast, open pit mining. I haven't heard of an underground lithium mine that's operational. The grades of ore in hard rock operations, just to confuse things even further, are given as lithium oxide. So how do we convert? One lithium unit is 2.1 units of lithium oxide, and one lithium oxide is 2.5 units of lithium carbonate. And the mines generally produce a concentrate of spodumene, which is at 6% lithium oxide or 15% lithium carbonate equivalent. Here's sort of a general cross-section of a typical pegmatite in the open pit that we would use to mine it. So how does the process work here? More typical mining operation, we have an open pit mine, and the ore is generally around 1% lithium oxide. We then do some crushing, and we float the ore, produce tailings, and we produce the spodumene concentrate, which is sort of upgraded by a factor of 6, is 6% lithium oxide. And this is a traded commodity. Often this is where the operation stops in a hard rock operation. Many miners just produce the concentrate and they sell it on to mostly China. And China, then we have the converter, which is where the real magic in chemistry happens. We need a lot of heat, and we do roasting and this is now where the mining engineer just supplies a box, some hydrometallurgical processes, and then we produce the lithium hydroxide. Often with this open pit mining with the spodumene ore, it's easier to produce hydroxide than carbonate. So what we find is these converters are never near the mine. They're mostly in China. As I said, there are big plans in Western Australia to put these converters into Australia in an area just outside Perth called Guyana, which they are dubbing the Lithium Valley of Australia. Those are big plans. It's going to take a lot of capital, and nothing's being built at this stage. If we look at the mass flows here, the recoveries are slightly better in the system. If we look at the mass flows, again, to produce 20,000 tons a year, we would need to mine about 700,000 tons a year of ore, produce 600,000 tons a year of tailings, 70,000 tons a year of concentrate. So not a large number, easily shippable. The problem with this is that we have 50,000 tons a year of tailings, which are in China, not at the mine in Australia. So these Chinese, or in the case of the Lithium Valley in Western Australia, we need to think about how we deal with these tailings that are then far removed from the mine site. So quite a small mining operation in mining terms. A case study for this type of mine, we need to not look further than the Greenbushes mine, which is in Western Australia, about 150 kilometers outside Perth. It's run by a company called Talison Lithium, which is a 50-50 JV between Tianqi and Albemarle. They're just finished an expansion to produce about 1 million tons a year of spodumene concentrate, which equates to 150,000 tons a year of LCE. Huge remaining resource, about 120 million tons at quite high lithium grades. And why I say these are high is here's a view of some other good deposits. These are not mines, these are deposits. And we have, for instance, Namaska lithium in Quebec, which is 50 million tons a year at 1.4, about half the grade of Greenbushes, but this is a good deposit. One that will be familiar, some of us South Africans will be familiar with, is AVZ Minerals, the Manono project in the DRC. It's a very big deposit at very good grade with some tantalum byproducts and I think some tin as well. So the problem is they're in the DRC, very big logistics issues. And then one that people might be familiar with, because Tawana Resources was listed on the JSE for a few years. They have the Bald Hill deposit in Western Australia. And it's still a good deposit, but it doesn't compare to some of the other ones, like Greenbushes. Current lithium production is sort of reflective of what I was saying. We have Australia at 33%, and that's Greenbushes. So all of it, this is hard rock, mostly Greenbushes, a few other open pits. We have China themselves. It's not that easy to get proper data from China. They have some of their own production from their salt flats, but a lot of this might actually be conversion. They might be buying spodumene concentrate from tantalum mines in say somewhere in Africa, and they might be converting it there, and it would count as Chinese production. Here, Chile and Argentina in the lithium triangle. So this is all brine. US has a few tiny little brine operations. And then quite interestingly, Zimbabwe at 3%, there's a mine called the Bikita mine, which was opened by Rio Tinto in the 60s, I think. And they produce all sorts of things, cesium, tantalum, and also some hard rock lithium, but not from spodumene. They produce it from a mineral called petalite, which is quite unique in the world. And yeah, it's an old mine. It's still going. I don't think it has a lot of room for expansion. What's the current production looking like? Globally, the world's currently producing around 250,000 tons a year of lithium carbonate. And most of it comes from what we call the Big Four. The Big Four are SQM, Albemarle, Ganfeng, and Tianqi. So Ganfeng is not on this list, but they're in the others, because Ganfeng in China is mostly conversion. They buy spodumene on the open market and they convert it, although they are looking to get into brines quite aggressively. What that means is the lithium market is very concentrated. These four guys control, I'd say, around 70% of the market, maybe more, and they will continue to do so in the near future. Other producers that are noticeable is Orocobre in Argentina. I've mentioned them before. The key thing here is that Toyota owns about 50% of them. So Toyota has secured their own supply for future electric vehicles. Livent, which used to be FMC, also brine operation in Argentina, and then Bikita in Zimbabwe I've discussed. What does the industry cost curve look like? This comes from the Orocobre investor presentation. That's why Orocobre is shown here in orange specifically, but all this at the start here, all the blue stuff is brine. It's cheaper to produce carbonate from brine than it is from hard rock. The reason being that the energy is free. Yes, it takes 24 months and that you need to build a big evaporation pond, but once the pond is going, the sun does all the work for you. Then we have what they call the integrated converters. So these would be the people like Greenbushes who have hard rock sources and then have their own conversion capacity in China or in Australia. And then the most expensive ones are the independent converters. So these are guys who need to buy the spodumene concentrate on the open market, which they pay a premium for. Brine is the most economical source for lithium carbonate. The reason the hard rock is more expensive here as well is because you can produce lithium hydroxide from your converter, which you would then have to convert to lithium carbonate. If you need to produce lithium hydroxide, the cost curve switches around. The hard rock guys are cheaper for lithium hydroxide. The brine guys will produce lithium carbonate first and then have to convert to hydroxide, which pushes up their costs. Why am I going on about lithium hydroxide and lithium carbonate? The reason is that currently your laptop battery, for instance, is using lithium carbonate, but the future electric car batteries, which use the lower cobalt, the NMC low cobalt batteries, like the NMC 811, will have to use lithium hydroxide. So that brings us to electric vehicles. This picture shows quite well the current use in batteries is mostly down here. Your smartphone batteries, 3 grams lithium, tablet 30 grams, laptop 40 grams, power tool 60 grams. If we want to drive electric vehicles, we're talking kilograms. So a significant factor increase in lithium required when we go to electric cars. You may think electric cars are a long way away, and they may or may not be. I don't want to make that the topic of this discussion. Let's just say that by 2025, Norway and Netherlands have pledged to ban the sale of new petrol and diesel cars. UK and France have followed suit by 2040. And let's just do a quick, I did a quick back of the cigarette box calculation to say, is it really so expensive to have 30 kilograms of lithium in your vehicle? So I looked at 30 kilograms in the average car, and that works out to about $300 of metal in the car. And then I Googled how much palladium is in a catalytic converter, which is about 5 grams, which funnily enough at current palladium prices works out to $300 metal in your car as well. So actually, not good news for the South African PGE industry, but it's about the same cost of metal in the car, whether it's lithium or palladium. 90 million cars a year are sold. If we assume half of those are EVs, then we're looking at 1.5 million tons a year of lithium carbonate. Now remember, the current production is 250,000 tons. And this is why many of these curves look like this. This is one of many companies forecasting the growth in lithium demand. So this particular company got current 2020 at about 250,000, and they say by 2030 we're looking at the 1.6 million. The reason I have this graph in here, I don't believe the ramp up they have here, but what's interesting about these guys just show you if we ramp up to a full electrified world and ignore the dates down here, let's call this 2050. We need 3.1 million tons a year, but we don't need it forever. We need it for about 40 years, 30 years at this level to replace all vehicles, and then there'll be recycling. So then lithium demand will drop off again. But because this period is, call it 30 years, it's the life of a mine. So that shouldn't hinder you wanting to invest in lithium capacity. So if you hit the peak here, you can operate your mine for 30 years. This graph was published in 2016 by USGS, and it caused a huge fuss in the investment community. What this shows is, what is the percentage increase in required capacity if the whole world went to 100%? And lithium, that's when lithium first hit the headlines in 2016. Lithium capacity needs to grow by almost a factor of 30. Cobalt, there was also a huge rush to cobalt. Many will remember it was a factor of 20. Now there's a lot of research going into taking the cobalt out of the batteries or reducing it. So this number is not really right anymore. For South Africans, also interesting will be to see the reduction in PGMs. But this is, of course, assuming 100% EV and ignoring hydrogen, which may pick up some of the vehicle fleet of the future. Lithium price development has mirrored these revelations of the previous graph. In 2015, it was at around $6 a kilogram or $6,000 a ton, and this is per ton of lithium carbonate. It then shot up. Following this graph and much news coverage, it shot up to around about $21 a kilogram. And since then it's fallen off as people have come to realize, okay, maybe electric vehicles are not coming next year, but maybe only in 5 years. And also with COVID-19 now, nobody's buying vehicles and actually nobody knows what's happening. So the price is like trickled down again from 20 to around 8. And if you think back to the cost curves at 8, the brine guys are making money and most of the hard rock guys are making money too. But prices like this will not encourage new investment in the industry. And the industry does require new investment because electric vehicles will come. So what are the future sources of supply? So let's be conservative and say we need between 1,000 and 2,000 kilotons per year of LCE additional capacity. I've split what I think the future development will be into a few phases. The phase one, the low-hanging fruit, will be expansion of the existing producers. So we take these really good deposits and we ramp them up. Atacama has got a lot of room for expansion, so Albemarle and SQM could probably add another 200,000 tons a year from that operation. They always have big discussions with the communities and the environmental department in Chile about how much brine they can draw from the salar, but they've been given the go-ahead to extend not to 200 yet, just to 100, or buy an extra 100, but they will get the go-ahead for this. We can expand at Greenbushes by another 100. And then some of the other smaller guys in Argentina are already going ahead with their expansions. So 300,000 tons a year will come from here. And these expansions are the cheapest expansions. They're brownfields, they're tying onto existing operations, and these are high-grade deposits. So they'll be the cheapest. But even at this cheapest level, we're looking at about $10,000 a ton of annual capacity. So if you want to build a 25,000 ton a year operation, you're looking at $250 million. So this phase alone is about a $3 billion investment into the industry. Phase two is what I call the shovel-ready or ongoing projects, but greenfields projects. A lot of news is Lithium Americas, the Cauchari project in Argentina that's going on at the moment, that's Ganfeng. There are various hard rock projects at various stages in Australia. There's the Nemaska Lithium project, which we spoke of earlier. There's Galaxy's projects, and there are other brine projects like Maricunga in Chile, which I spoke about, and a few others. So these are about 250,000 tons a year additional capacity, much higher capex because it's not such good deposits and it's greenfields. So here we're looking at about $450 million for a 25,000 ton a year operation, which is exactly the capital number that's currently being spent at Cauchari by Lithium Americas. So here we're looking at $4.5 billion investment. One big question mark in the lithium industry is Bolivia. Uyuni is a relatively low grade. We're talking about 400 milligrams a liter lithium salar in Bolivia, but it's huge. It's the largest salar in the world. It's got endless potential. If it was not in Bolivia, there would already be 15 companies trying to develop it. Because Bolivia is got all sorts of flirtations with socialism, nobody really wants to invest there, and nobody's really sure. There's a big initiative by the German government, probably pushed by the automobile industry to develop it, to have a Germany-Bolivia joint venture, but it's very early stage and nobody knows where the capital's coming from. So I've left Bolivia off these forecasts for now. And then we have phase three, which is new sources of supply with new type. So one interesting project is the Rio Tinto Jadar project in Serbia. It was discovered in 2004, and actually Rio Tinto have a huge boron business, and they were looking for some more sources of boron. And they discovered this new mineral called jadarite with this seriously complicated chemical formula. It contains lithium and boron. It's a very big, very high-grade deposit of lithium, and it has the potential to produce lithium, but the process is completely new. So since 2004, for almost 20 years, they've been trialing the process and drilling up this deposit, and it's very real, and I'm sure Rio Tinto will eventually pull the trigger on this. Another one are the clay resources. They are mostly in America, in the USA. So the way I imagine these things, these used to be salars, but they then got washed away, and the lithium actually got caught up in little clay particles in these, and they're mostly in the Nevada desert. So there's the famous Thacker Pass project, also owned by Lithium Americas in Nevada. They have about 3 million tons of lithium carbonate at 2,300 ppm. So that's quite a good grade. That's almost Atacama grades. Again, the processing is completely new. They're running pilot plants at the moment. They seem to be working, but it hasn't been proven at scale. There's a potential for 50,000 tons a year, at least, from clay sources. So here we're looking at another 100,000 tons. The capital is even higher because it's green fields and new deposits. Looking at about 500 million for a 25,000 ton operation, or another $2 billion investment. So this, let's just go back. We have 300, 250, and another 100, which gives us 650. We need between 1 and 2 million. So that leaves a significant shortfall for other projects. And total investment requirements are around $10 billion in the lithium industry. So to summarize, lithium mining is easy. It's either pumping or it's easy open pit mining, but the processing is very difficult and expensive. Lithium demand growth is a direct reflection of the growth in electric vehicle uptake, which I think we can all agree is real. We need significant industry investment to expand global capacity. The timing may be slower, but a supply crunch is coming. A key thing is we need long-term prices that are higher than current prices to encourage investment. These greenfield projects don't fly at 8,000. It needs to be at least over $12,000 per ton. There's room for projects, and there are available ore bodies, but they're lower quality than the existing ones. They require better lithium prices, and technological innovation will have to be at the forefront, whether that's new technologies like I discussed on the brines, whether that's improving recoveries, or whether that's completely new processing of minerals that we haven't processed before. With that, I'd like to open up for questions.
Thank you, Paul. That was absolutely fascinating. I have to admit that this was very new to me and interesting, and background overview, and I really enjoyed learning a little bit about the big picture of lithium. So thank you from my side. There is some questions are popping in, so I'm going to just throw them at you. Do you have any comments on the Cornish lithium hot brine in Cornwall, UK?
No, I don't. I haven't heard of that, to be honest, but I do know, and maybe it's similar to some of the projects in the USA. What they often have is they have geothermal hot brine is pumped from far underground, and it's used to produce geothermal energy. This happens in California, for instance. But what people have found is there's some. They said, if we're going to pump this brine up, run it through a geothermal plant, why not also run it through some sort of lithium extraction process? Yeah. And that brings us back to what I discussed earlier. There would be one of those new technologies, let's run it through an ion exchange or a solvent extraction. It might work, but then you have to process a very low grade brine through a very big plant. So if we take the example I had earlier, the 9 million cubes a year, you need to build a plant, a solvent extraction plant that has 9 million cubes a year of brine running through it, and you might only get out 5,000 tons a year of lithium. So the capex will be huge for these things.
Yeah, that makes sense. You had a very nice comparison of the different operating costs. So there's on the chat here a question about, have you explored the relative environmental impact of the different production routes and also the different types, just like you did the production cost?
Like the environmental impact, like all mining, there's an environmental impact. And it's actually difficult to say which one has, whether brine or hard rock has a higher impact. I would say that because lithium is regarded as the metal of the future, the green energy metal, we need to, as a world, look at how we're going to produce lithium with only renewable energy. That's where evaporation ponds are very nice, because they use the sun mostly. So if we can also run the plants and the pumps on solar energy, that would be great. Where at the moment, if we use hard rock sources, they get converted in some factory in China, which runs almost entirely on coal power. So maybe Chinese hard rock lithium at the moment is probably the least green lithium you're going to get.
Yeah. So one of the questions I was thinking about in the evaporation pans, is there anything that we can do to enhance the evaporation? You know, even technology applications to make the recoveries more efficient, that kind of thing, that you can think of.
Yeah, the big problem in the evaporation ponds is that the lithium, because it's the most reactive of all the metals, it's absolutely the last metal that gets out of your brine, that concentrates out. So it often gets stuck as a liquid within the salts that crystallize out in the ponds. So what we were actually looking at doing in Argentina, we thought of putting little dredges into the evaporation ponds to dig up some of that lithium. So there are little mechanical innovations you can do. This is unproven. This is just the concept we had. But your big recovery issues in the pond is getting the entrapped lithium out of the salts. So in Chile, for instance, in Atacama, they wash the salt to get the lithium to run out. But then there's a risk of getting all the other crap to wash out with you again as well.
Yes. So, I mean, in the news, a lot is about tailings and tailings management. What is the tailings dam management in the brine processing like?
It's well, the lucky thing is these salars are huge flat pans, so you have a lot of space to store your salt tailings, and also there's almost no rainfall. And in the Atacama Desert, they had 30 millimeters over the last 10 years. You know, they don't even cover their potassium chloride dumps. So you basically just need to be prudent at the angle of repose and store it somewhere where you don't really get seepage into any groundwater. But it's actually really easy to manage those salt tailings in the desert. Yeah. I saw there was a question also just popping up here about byproducts of specifically potassium chloride, potash. So like I said, the Atacama Desert is actually primarily, the Atacama Salt Flat is primarily a potassium operation with lithium as a byproduct. But now with prices the way they are, that's turned around. The Atacama Desert or the Atacama Salt Pan is unique. The grade is way higher in both lithium and potassium than elsewhere. The Argentinian ones do have potassium chloride, but it's not economic to separate that from the halite in the salt waste. It may be one day, but at the moment it doesn't make sense. You'd have to build a plant that's bigger than the lithium plant just to get a little bit of potassium chloride.
Okay. I mean, one of the questions here is, what is your perspective on the likelihood of the brine guys squeezing out the hard rock guys just by increasing the volumes?
If Uyuni in Bolivia goes, there's a risk. The good thing for the hard rock guys is that if you want to make lithium hydroxide, you need to then produce lithium chloride in the brine, on the brine side, and then convert that to hydroxide, which probably adds about $2,000 to $3,000 a ton in costs, and you need an extra plant for that. So on the hydroxide side, the hard rock guys are there. And if you have a good hard rock deposit, like a Manono in DRC or Greenbushes that I discussed, then you can be cost competitive.
I mean, I think you did touch on it in terms of the recycling. So we'll reach a peak, and then in terms when the battery recycling kicks in about 30 years, the answer is that basically the production capacity will not be required as high as it would be in that 30-year peak period.
Yeah, correct. But I mean, that's 30 around on 20 years.
Yes,
so
exactly.
I wouldn't worry too much about it. And also, who knows what we'll need lithium for by then? You know, we might all have power walls and things like that.
Yeah. Just from a South African perspective, there's two people also who are asking, what about South Africa? Is there any form of deposit of lithium that we have a chance of getting into the action?
No. We don't have good pegmatites in South Africa, and we don't have any salt pans in South Africa.
It's just not geologically one.
Yeah, I mean, in South Africa, there's a lot of hope on the hydrogen economy because that'll push the PGMs. And I think there's room for both electric vehicles and hydrogen. The numbers I showed here was assuming about half of the global vehicles will be electric. So that means another half can be a hydrogen run. The technology just isn't advanced enough at this moment.
That's right. I mean, I think what we try and do is to get somebody from the other perspective to give us the view on the hydrogen economy and I think that's a good presentation to follow up on this one. It's always this projecting into 40 years from now is hard because, are we going to be ready when we need it? Anyway, there's a comment here about a Czech Republic deposit. Do you have any knowledge of that deposit and how it compares on a global scale?
I've read a little bit about it. It's one of those new ones, so totally different mineral. I don't know what it's called. You'd have to invent a new process for it. Why people like it is because it's in the EU, and the EU with the German car industry wants to have their own battery manufacturing with an entire supply chain controlled within the EU. So they'll look for anything, and it might well get built because they'll get subsidized with very cheap credit and EU funding, but it's probably not something that's first tier on a global level.
Yeah, strategic, but not necessarily first tier. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So do you think that in the future, countries will start focusing on converting the hard rock deposits locally as well?
Yes, there's a big push in Australia, that, like I said, the lithium valley, as they call it. I mean, DRC, are they going to convert their hard rock stuff? Probably not. Zimbabwe, probably not. There are a few pegmatites in Mali that probably won't convert. These pegmatites are not that frequent. You've got a few in Africa, and then you have the ones in Australia, and the ones in Australia will get converted, and they'll do it locally eventually. But the African ones will just get shipped to China. I don't see how that's going to change anytime soon.
So, and there's no opportunity, you think, maybe for a Southern Africa converter kind of setup?
I mean, like the rare earth idea that was being bandied about a while back.
Yes.
No, very energy intensive. I don't know. South Africa and energy don't go well together at the moment.
Unless we link it to renewable energy, that's sort of what I was thinking. If you have a converter, you are in the regions of temperatures that you can reach with concentrated solar power.
Yeah, put that in the Northern Cape. I mean, we can really dream, but you'd have to. At least the rare earths are in South Africa. It makes a lot more sense than importing stuff from DRC to convert in South Africa. The Chinese already own a large stake in that project in the DRC. There's no way they're going to take it to South Africa. They'll send it to China. Yeah,
I know. We can dream. It's always good. Is there any lithium in Botswana with all those vast salt pans?
Yeah, I mean, they're the sewer pans in Botswana and they mostly produce soda ash, I think. So before I worked in lithium, I actually worked in potash, and we were seeing if there was potash there, and there wasn't. It was just soda ash and sodium chloride, so halide. So I don't think there's lithium there. I didn't look at it specifically for that, but it doesn't seem right. I mean, they wouldn't have had those volcanoes surrounding it to wash the lithium into the pan. So I don't think geologically it would be there.
But I mean, just basically from the size of the deposits in South America alone, there's what you say, almost a bottomless pit of supply. It's not like there's supply for this. It's just a matter of the investment into the building of the plants.
Yeah. So, and then grade is king, right? The better your grade, the cheaper your plant.
Absolutely. So there's some questions about, just a general question about hard rock mining. Does it require a bankable study since it's open cast? And I think you did touch on it, but can the tailings produce some commercial byproducts with all tailings from these processes?
So the first question is more a general one, which applies to all open pit mines. The answer is you only need a bankable study if you need money from the bank. So if you can self-finance your open pit, you don't need any studies. You can just mine. The bankable studies are so that you can get bank finance. And the second question is the byproducts. Absolutely. Most of these open pit pegmatites have tantalum and tin as a byproduct, which doesn't feature in these economics, but the cost curves I showed include the byproduct credit. So that would have already been taken off the operating costs. So almost the hard rock guys need the byproducts to remain competitive.
Yeah. Like many processes, we have complex minerals. So here's an interesting one. Do you think that future battery technology might use lithium products earlier in the production cycle, for example, spodumene concentrate?
It's an excellent question. I don't think the spodumene concentrate, but I don't know if the listeners have heard about solid state batteries before. That's the next generation. So that rather than have the lithium ions in a liquid in your battery, which takes up more space and makes the battery heavier, they're looking at putting solid lithium metal in a sealed battery and making the entire anode out of lithium. What that means is the battery is going to have a much higher energy density, it's going to be much lighter, and we won't need lithium hydroxide and lithium chloride anymore, we're going to need lithium metal. This is about 10 years away. It's a really big talk in the car industry. So in order to make lithium metal, you need lithium chloride. And lithium chloride is actually the lithium form that it swims around in the brine. So what you could do is you could go straight from your concentrated brine to the lithium chloride without making carbonate or hydroxide.
Yeah.
So it's good for the brine guys, not so good for the hard rock guys. The hard rock guys still need to convert it. Now, maybe you can spit lithium chloride straight out of the converter. I don't know enough about the hydrometallurgy for that, but it's definitely a step in that direction.
Yeah, so it's definitely a shortcut for the brine guys, which then encourages those big ones in South America. That's very, very nice question, yes. Just, do you know any prospecting in Portugal? One of our attendees
Yes.
Okay. So
there's a hard rock project there. And again, it's EU, so it's going to get funded. I haven't really looked at it in detail. It's another one of those that's marginal, but because of its location, it'll probably get funded. But being in the EU is an advantage and also a disadvantage because the environmental regulations, and especially a small country like Portugal, are very tough.
Yeah. I see there's a question so if Mintec is looking at lithium processing, given they have a good record from the late 1960s, the answer is yes, Mintec does look at processing for lithium because we have the processing groups, the hydrometallurgists, the flotation. The mining, as Paul so nicely presented today, is not the same as normal mining, but the processing is quite complex. So there's a lot of history. But as a strategic research activity, it's a difficult one to justify for South Africa where we don't have a South African deposit. So Mintec is government owned, and a lot of our research focuses on Southern African focused areas. So it's a complicated question in a lot of ways, but obviously we do have the knowledge. So in terms of the processing capacity, so we do a lot of work on it, but not as a strategic research area. If that helps answer that question. I don't know if you want to comment on that, Paul, but I think
no, I don't know what that.
Yeah,
I don't know about that.
Yeah, jump in and help. So this is interesting. I think if you want to answer in your chemistry, what makes lithium so unique as an element when sodium and potassium sit so close to it on the periodic table? So
it's lighter. Like I said, I'm not a specialist, but the way I see it is because it's so far up the periodic table, it's the third element, that one electron is really looking to react more than the metals. So that's why we talk about a lithium ion battery and not a sodium ion battery. or a magnesium ion battery, because that lithium just really needs that second electron or something like that. Maybe you can help me out here, Isabel.
It wants to do its job, and that property that it creates is what makes it so unique. Maybe we should get Leon Kluge back in to give us the orbital explanation. he's a chemist that can explain it in more detail, but I think generally the approach is right. It's really reactive, and it wants to react, and that's what makes the property so useful. But I think it also said anything else, all of those elements there are reactive, but the specific properties of lithium is what we're after for the batteries. There's a question here that I see is quite from early on, is the Arcadia Lithium project in Zimbabwe. Are you aware of that project? Arcadia.
No, I'll have to look it up.
Okay, some interesting background.
It'll definitely be hard rock. There's no brine in Zimbabwe, so it would be hard rock.
You did give it in the presentation, but then maybe you want to give a quick recap for hard rock mining versus the brine mining.
So CapEx in hard rock mining is often just looking at the mine to produce the concentrate, and those are super cheap. It's really a little pit in the ground with a little mobile crusher and some flotation equipment. So you could get a mine going for $40 million, but then all you're going to produce is spodumene concentrate. And then you're at the vagaries of the market, and then you need to find a Chinese guy to buy it from you. And the real CapEx is in the converter, which sits in China. So all in CapEx, if we go from lithium ore all the way to lithium hydroxide, is similar to a brine complete system. So we're looking at between $15,000 and $20,000 per ton of annual capacity. On the OpEx side, it depends on your grade, but I would say between $5,000 and $8,000 a ton would be your OpEx.
Thank you. I think we've reached the end of our hour. If you have one more comment, just as a general closing comment, that would be nice. But apart from that, I think just from my side, I really enjoyed this discussion, and hearing all the opinions and the discussion, and the overview was fantastic, Paul. So I really appreciate your time. And I'm sure I saw there was a lot of big thank yous across the chat. So people also appreciated your time and the very, very well presented presentation. Also beautiful pictures. I really enjoyed to see the scope of those brine mines. It was very interesting. Any comments from you to the last attendees?
Thanks everyone for listening. It's great to see so much interest, and I must say I was very lucky to have worked in Argentina. I've seen those salt pans. They are unique in the world, and I'd love for anyone else, if they have knowledge of a certain industry, to share that. I love the rare earth talk, and that's what inspired me to give this talk. And I think anyone else, if even if it's an overview of copper mining in Zambia, not everybody knows about that. We'd love to see it. So everyone else is invited to share.
Paul, I really thank you for that. It's been a fantastic experience to sort of wrangle people to come and give us their thoughts. And so far, the feedback has been, for both speakers and attendees, that this is a wonderful opportunity to hear about everybody else's work and sharing our experiences. Fantastic. And thank you for your time and doing this for us. Wrangle all your friends to come and present on their work as well. I think it is a fantastic way that we've learned to keep contact with each other during this tough times, and we plan to keep going with these webinars beyond the crisis. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Isabel.
Thank you. Thanks again.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Cheers.
Bye.
It's getting serious on this track.